Hello and welcome to HBM's UFO Corner. This week we're going to be talking about the Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot invasion of 1973. Hoo-wee! Over and over. Anyway, in the early 1970s experienced one of the rarest of all paranormal phenomena. For a year and change, housewives kept their shotguns close, men took up arms to patrol their neighborhoods. An electronic technician in his 20s named Stan Gordon got very little sleep. This double flap was reported in 9 counties, an area spanning over 80 miles. I'm talking, of course, about the Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot invasion of 1973. A flap is a term used by ufologists, those who study alien phenomenon, to describe a spike in such activity. A double flap, then, is when alien phenomenon coincides with some other paranormal activity. Heading up the investigation of this double flap was Stan Gordon. Born in 1949 in Greensburg, which is part of Westmoreland County in southwest Pennsylvania, Stan has been interested in the paranormal all his life, especially alien phenomenon. In 1965, he led an investigation into a UFO encounter near Kecksburg, which some argue heralded the strangeness to come. After that investigation, he formed a Westmoreland-based ufology group, which proved invaluable to the police as they became inundated with reports. And then, and this is him in current day. Stan, to his credit, has a healthy dose of skepticism toward reports of paranormal activity. Ufology can get very silly very fast, which is the reason I don't have much interest in it. His skepticism is likely due in part to an uncle of his who ran the county detective's office when he was growing up. Stan wants to believe absolutely, but there aren't enough hours in the day to go about it all willy-nilly. The right methodology and the credibility of the person making the report are key. UFO sighting in December of 72 may have been the beginning of the invasion. Westmoreland County residents reported glowing spheres of pure white light hovering in the sky from which shards of luminous material fell toward the ground. Stan's ufology group tracked down a handful of this material, which appeared to be pieces of ordinary scrap metal. Just to be sure, though, the group sent these pieces to a lab for analysis, and strangely enough, while 95% of the material was plain old aluminum, 5% of it couldn't be identified. What does that mean exactly? I don't know. Nobody does, as far as I know. Residents of Greensburg reported seeing a hairy bipedal creature chasing their neighbor's 2 dogs in the middle of the day. When the Bigfoot was confronted, it fled into woods which bordered the back of the homeowner's property. Bigfoot aren't known to be musk-free, but the smell of rotten eggs is much more common in hauntings, especially those involving demonic activity. In Pennsylvania, this smell became ubiquitous with Bigfoot encounters over the course of the invasion. For the rest of January into the February, grisly evidence of Bigfoot or some other immensely powerful animal mounted. Chickens were being killed in their coops, which had been violently ripped apart. A few families woke up to find their dogs dead in the yard, their spines broken. Many of these fatal attacks occurred in and around Pottstown in Montgomery County. Very few Bigfoot encounters are reported though out of the ones that were, a new detail was added to their appearance. Some had shiny black fur and beady red eyes. As far as alien phenomenon went, nothing was reported in those 2 months. Then spring occurred. Not only did the number of UFO sightings and Bigfoot encounters drastically increase, but the variety did as well. Throughout the spring of 1973, people reported seeing Bigfoot between 5 and 9 feet tall with fur that was brown, black, or white. According to a report, Stan received one even wore a suit of some shiny fabric. The UFOs, meanwhile, now included ones in the shape of triangles, ovals, cigars, footballs, and my favorite, arrowheads. So it's a rather lengthy read. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Now I do know there were a few strange reports that occurred of UFO sightings. There was one time where there was a glowing area in a field, which was bright enough to read a newspaper if it was held 1 foot close to the ground. The newspaper could be read by that. There was the report of two Sasquatch that were seen walking along a fence line, and a guy and a couple of kids. The guy had a shotgun. He took a pot shots at both creatures. Nothing really happened to the creatures. They turned around and walked away, walked back. There was a lady who claimed that she shot a Sasquatch on her porch, which disappeared into a ball of light. Her son-in-law heard the shots from nearby. He came over. He saw a few Sasquatch appearing to help one other Sasquatch. There were strange sounds that occurred in the area. A lot of weird stuff that was going on in the Greensburg area and in the Westmoreland County area in that year, 1973. Did these reports happen? Well, Stan Gordon looked into them. He gave them a lot of credibility. He believes that there's a possibility that these things actually happen. And there were a few reports that said that individuals claimed to have seen Sasquatch coming out of UFOs, things of that nature. I don't know what to make of that, to be quite honest. Now, could these aliens have abducted these Sasquatch and perhaps, I don't know, brought them into the UFOs and then released them after they were finished with them? John Green pointed out in his book, Sasquatch Apes Among Us, that just because you see a Sasquatch close to a UFO or coming out of a UFO, that does not necessarily mean that that's where they came from originally. And I would have to agree with the late John Green on that point. I just don't see any possibility of what is seen in the rest of the country being related to what we're seeing in Westmoreland County in 1973. In fact, John Green said he didn't think it was the same thing at all. Or he wrote that in the book Sasquatch Sleeps Among Us. And he wrote quite extensively about the sightings that were going on in that area and of Stan Gordon's investigations. So it's a fascinating series of events, that's for certain, in UFO and Sasquatch history. That's assuming the Sasquatch are the same, the ones that are close to the UFOs, that they're the same as what we have in other parts of the country. Although I question that. I question if the Sasquatch are the same thing. Because Witnesses were seeing these things with really long arms, glowing eyes. I'm talking really long arms, glowing red eyes, close to UFOs, in the vicinity of where UFOs were seen, and things of that nature. These events most likely did happen. I don't think too many people are going to lie about something and then just maintain their stories over time if they were fabricating them. But then again, people can maintain a story for a long time, I suppose. But I'm not going to sit here and say yes, every report out of that area was credible. There were probably some that were not. But it wouldn't shock me if these reports were true, at least in some cases. Oh, let's see. There was a photo I was going to comment on. I forgot to. And that was this one of what appears to be a three-toed track. Now, a lot of people are like, well, okay, three-toed tracks. Can primates walk on three toes? Is this foot specifically designed for three toes? Or did it lose a couple of toes? Or were the toes burnt off? Were the toes, do the toes not show up sufficiently in the soil? These are some pretty large toes, as you can see. So could this be a genuine Sasquatch track? Or a genuine track of one of these entities? We really don't know for sure. I would imagine if Dr. Meldrum was to look at it, he would probably think it was a hoax. He would probably declare it a hoax. Because, as any anthropologist will tell you, primates are not adapted to walking on three toes, especially toes this big. Unless the creatures that were seen and reported and the tracks that were found were of alien Sasquatch, which is entirely possible. I mean, John Green said it himself, these are not the same thing as what are seen in the Pacific Northwest or in other areas of the country. So, what are we to make of this? I'd have to agree with John Green. These are not the same thing as what is reported in other areas of the United States. These are something different. And most likely, they're not the same as your regular run of the mill Sasquatch. At least, not the ones that are seen in, let's say, the Pacific Northwest or anywhere else. These could have been alien Sasquatch that did come from the UFOs. It's entirely possible. And that's good news for this week. We want to thank you very much for tuning in. You guys are the heart of the show. I don't know what I'm going to talk about next week. It'll be back to regular UFOs. No cryptozoology involved. I'll try and find another famous or perhaps infamous UFO case, and we'll discuss it then. So until then, y'all be good, HBM's UFO Corner.